Hello dear students, I am your physics teacher and my name is Anila. Hope you have seen my introduction video and remember my face, right? So shall we start? I am not going to start the topics of class 11 in this video class, but we will discuss about or we shall recall some topics which you have already studied in your lower classes. Okay, when you go through the part 1 textbook of class 11, you have seen the chapter names like motion in a straight line, motion in a plane, laws of motion, work energy and power, gravitation, rotational motion, etc. When you hear these terms, hope you remember which are already studied in your lower classes, right? So in this video class, let us recall some terms like motion, types of motion, some physical quantities like distance, displacement, etc. Then its graphical representation, how to represent these physical quantities. Then equations of motion. And finally, the laws which are related to the motion. So this is our lecture flow in this video class. Okay, so shall we start? So what do you mean by motion? Or when we say that an object is in motion, an object is said to be in motion when it changes its position with respect to the time. When an object changes its position with the time, then we say that an object is in motion. So in order to specify or describe an object is in motion, we need to specify a reference point. That reference point is called the origin. So as an example, I can say our school, Madanicious, let it is 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers from the Malapalli bus stand. We have specified the position of our school with respect to bus stand. So in this example, the bus stand is a reference point, right? So we could have also chosen other reference points according to our convenience. So therefore, to describe the position of an object, we need to specify a reference point that is called the origin. Hope you are following me, right? Okay, so the simplest type of motion is a motion that is along a straight line. Motion along a straight line, that is the simplest type of motion. So in class 11th, you will study motion in a straight line and also motion in a plane. But motion in a straight line, you have already studied the basic of that in your lower classes, especially in your class 9th, right? Okay, so which are the types of motion you have studied? Uniform motion and non-uniform motion. What do you mean by uniform motion? If an object covers equal distances in equal interval of time, then we say that an object is in uniform motion. So if I say that I travel in first second I travel 5 meter. In the next second also I traveled 5 meter. In the third second also I travel 5 meter. That means in every second I am traveling 5 meter. That means I am in uniform motion. So if an object covers equal distances in equal interval of time, then we say that an object is in uniform motion. Then what do you mean by non-uniform motion? Yes, if the object covers unequal distances in equal interval of time, then we say that that object is in non-uniform motion. For example, when a car is moving on a crowded street, right? So that is an example of a non-uniform motion. So these are the types of motion. Okay, so in certain physical quantities, what do you mean by distance? The total path covered by the object. The total path covered by the object, that is known as distance. Then another term, displacement. Hope you know the difference between distance and displacement. What is displacement? The shortest distance. The shortest distance measured from the initial to the final position of an object, that is known as displacement. Distance means the total path covered, but displacement means the shortest distance covered. So that is distance and displacement. Another term, speed. What was speed? Yes, rate of change of distance, or speed is equal to distance divided by time, that is known as speed. Then another term, that is velocity. What was velocity? Rate of change of displacement, or velocity is equal to displacement divided by time. That is known as velocity. One more physical quantity you have studied. What is that? Do you remember? Yes, acceleration. What is acceleration? Rate of change of velocity. That is known as acceleration. Acceleration is equal to change in velocity divided by the time taken. That is acceleration. Which of these quantities are scalar quantities and which one are vector quantities? We have studied about, we have heard about scalar quantities and vector quantities. What was scalar quantity? The quantities which has only magnitude that are known as scalar quantity, which has both magnitude and direction are known as vector quantities. Can you say which all quantities, which all physical quantities are scalar quantities and vector quantities? What about distance? Is it a scalar quantity or a vector quantity? It is a scalar quantity. Distance is a scalar quantity. Speed is a scalar quantity, but displacement, velocity and acceleration, they are vector quantities. We will study more about these in class 11th. Okay. One more thing. Do you remember the SI unit of distance and displacement? SI unit, yes, it is meter. What about speed and velocity? What is this SI unit? What is this unit? How we express speed and velocity? Yes, it is meter per second. What about acceleration? What about acceleration? Yes, that is meter per second square. So we will study more about these units, physical quantities, vector quantities, scalar quantities, all in units and measurements, motion in a straight line and motion in a plane. Okay. Then graphical representation of motion. What is the use of graphs? Graphs provide a convenient method to present the basic information about a variety of events. Right. You have studied about different types of graphs in motion in a straight line. Distance time graph, velocity time graph, etc. You have also studied to draw distance time graph for a uniform motion and also for a non-uniform motion, and similarly of velocity time graph, right? So let us draw distance time graph first for a uniform motion. So time is represented along the x-axis and distance is represented along the y-axis. So this is a distance time graph. I am going to draw it for a uniform motion. So how will be the graph? It will be a straight line inclined to the x-axis, right? It is for a uniform motion. Another graph, that is velocity time graph. Velocity time graph. Time is represented along the x-axis, velocity is represented along the y-axis, and if it is a uniform motion, how will be the graph? Yes, it will be a straight line inclined to the x-axis. So these two graphs represent an object which is in uniform motion. What about the area under this graph? In a distance time graph, if you find out the area under the graph, yes, that will gives you the speed. And what about here, velocity time graph? Yes, that will gives you the area under the graph will give you the acceleration or the slope. Will give you the acceleration. Okay, so these are examples of an object which is traveling in a uniform motion. If it is in non-uniform motion, how will we represent the graph? It will be an irregular shape. It will be a curved shape, right? You remember it. Okay, I am not going into the details of graphs of non-uniform motion. I am just trying to recall all these factors. Okay, shall we move to the next? Equations of motion. Do you remember which are the equations of motion? When an object moves along a straight line with a uniform acceleration, it is possible to relate its velocity, acceleration and distance covered by it in a certain time interval by a set of equations. They are known as equations of motion. There are three equations of motion. First one is V is equal to U plus AT. Second one, S is equal to UT plus half AT square. Third one, V square minus U square is equal to 2AS. What is V, U, S and A? V it's a final velocity. What about u? It's a initial velocity. S is a displacement or distance. And t, what is t? The time taken. Okay, you have derived these equations of motion, these three equations of motion by graphical method, right? You have drawn certain graphs, velocity, time graph, and you have derived these equations. V is equal to u plus at, S is equal to u plus ut plus half at square, v square minus u square is equal to 2as. In class 11th also, you are going to draw these graphs and also derive these using graphical method. Apart from the graphical method, we will derive this equation by using calculus, integral calculus. Actually, the nature of the subject of physics is such that a certain minimum use of mathematics is a must. Okay, the physics needs mathematics because we wish to develop objective description of the world around us and express our observation in terms of measurable quantities. Okay, so we will derive these equations, these three equations of motion by using calculus also. So don't bother about the derivations and all. Okay, shall we move to the next topic? Okay, that is laws of motion. The first law of motion, what was that? An object continues to be in a state of rest or of uniform motion along a straight line unless acted upon by an unbalanced forces. You have studied about balanced forces and unbalanced forces. So this was the first law of motion. Right. An object continues to be in a state of rest or of uniform motion along a straight line unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. Okay. So from first law of motion you may remember another term. You remember it? What was that term? Inertia. What was inertia? The tendency of object to resist a change in their state of rest or of uniform motion. That was called inertia. Right? Okay. Then the second law of motion. What was the second law of motion? The rate of change of momentum of an object is proportional to the applied unbalanced force in the direction of the force. Rate of change of momentum of an object is proportional to the unbalanced force in the direction of the force. From this second law of motion, you have studied an equation for force. What was the equation of force? F is equal to ma. What is m? M is the mass of the object and a is the acceleration. F is equal to ma. And the third law of motion. What is the third law of motion? Everyone knows that. Yes, the third law of motion. To every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction and they act on different bodies. In our class 11 also, we will study these laws of motion in more detail. Actually, it is in chapter 5. Okay, so what was inertia? The natural tendency of objects to resist a change in their state of rest or of uniform motion, that is known as inertia. SI unit of force. I already said the equation of force. What is the equation of force? F is equal to ma. What is the SI unit of force? Newton. This symbol is capital letter N. Or you can say that kilogram meter per second square. So, hope you got an idea about certain chapters which you are going to study in class 11th. Okay. Another one, that is momentum. The momentum of an object is a product of its velocity and mass and velocity. The momentum of an object is a product of its mass and velocity. How do you represent momentum? Which letter you use to represent momentum? P. P is equal to mv. P is a momentum and m mass, v is a velocity. So momentum is equal to mass into velocity. Okay, we will study about this in detail in class 11. Hope you are following me. Thank you.